Hi. I can't hear. Oh, you're muted. Never mind. Can you hear me?
Really helps if I turn on the mic.
Oh, I hear you.
Do you know? I think it does. Catherine, can you say something so we can hear you?
Test, test, 1, 2, 3.
Nope, can't hear you.
Hello.
I don't know if that's on your
Hello.
side.
No. My audio thing is going green.
I
Test,
knew you would
test,
be here.
Test, test, test,
It's
test.
Weird though, I was like, there's a lot of cars
1,
here.
2,
Is it daylight?
3.
Am I
Test,
early?
test, test.
Yeah, the time changed. Like these
Can't
first
hear me?
few meetings after the time change, you're like,
I know. Wow, sick.
Test, test.
yeah, I fixed it.
Weird.
We got you,
I'm
Catherine.
glad you're here.
Yay.
Yay. All right. So we are live.
Great. Glad everyone could see that.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the April already Advisory Committee on Racial Equity, Inclusion and Human Rights meeting. It is 6:01 on April 28th. We will go ahead and get started with our roll call. We will begin with, well, because we have folks online, actually what we're going to do is we're going to do a roll vote. So I can call the names. Katie Robinson.
Here.
Adam Baker.
Here and alive.
Suzette Burra here. Okay, Sharon is unable to make it. Shane Boyes.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Roth.
Here.
And Teresa Fallon.
Present.
Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully Ray will be joining us shortly, and our city council liaison is at a previous meeting, but should be joining us shortly. And we also have with us our assistant city manager, Courtney O'Donnell. So we have really one thing on our agenda tonight to get through, because we've got a lot of folks that, oh, you know what, this is all connected in my head, excuse me. Because the next thing on the agenda is public comment, but we do have basically one thing that if there are folks that are going to be coming to speak to tonight, I'd rather move that public comment item down and just do approval of the minutes and then go ahead and get started, because we have so many guest speakers with us tonight. We want to be mindful of folks' time. So with that, may I have a motion for the approval of minutes for the March 24th, 2026 meeting?
So move.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion, changes, updates?
Yes, I am referred to twice in the minutes as Mike.
Oopsie.
Both times?
Mike Roth, yes.
Well, Mike, we'll fix that for you. Sorry about that, Mark. Thanks for catching that. I didn't.
Are you talking to Mike?
Yeah. I see it now. All right, Mark, we will update those. So, go ahead.
I'm
Jessica.
not super picky, but I don't have an age. And you got it right on the first page, but wrong on the second. It's not a huge deal.
Hey, great. Well, we have a couple edits to the members participating in the meeting. We have our note taker coming in, so we'll make sure to blame her. Just kidding. You are fine, Ray. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
You're really great on time.
You are perfect. Thank you, Ray, for the attendance and minutes. Can you
Here,
your name here? Perfect. Thank you so much, Raylan Burke. Ray, we had a motion and a second on our meeting minutes for the March, but Mark's name is spelled Mike and Teresa's name is spelled with an H.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's nice.
We just wanted you to be here before. I'm just kidding. That timing was very serendipitous. So with those amendments to the minutes, we will take a roll vote on their acceptance. Ray.
Yes.
Thank you. Adam.
Yes.
Teresa with
Yes.
no H. Yes. Exactly. Mark, not much. Shane.
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I also approve those meeting minutes. All right. Now, our committee business. So as you read in the packet, which was sent out, our committee has been referred by City Council to look at the sidewalk ordinance that had some changes made to it, rather some proposed changes made. And we've got some folks who are really have so much more experience in downtown and are directly impacted to share their feedback. We have folks from the Bangor, Downtown Bangor Partnership and the Bangor Public Library. Before we get started on talking about what that amendment might look like, and really, you know,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. What our, I guess, feedback or thought process might be. I did want to open it up now to public comment. For anyone that is in attendance that would like, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, may I make a suggestion? Is it helpful if City Manager Lear gives like a verbal overview of the topic before we open
I
it?
always like a verbal overview.
Does that make sense?
That sounds
I thought you
wonderful.
were gonna say, I always like hearing from city managers.
Oh, yes, I always do.
I was very excited for a moment.
I am thrilled to welcome to the table City Manager Lear to give an overview on our ordinance amendment and what this looks like. I thank you very much for that recommendation. I think it would be very helpful to start us off on the same page. Thank you for being here.
So I think this conversation really got started last fall. Really specifically in the Cedar Street and First Street area. There were some folks in and around the CHCS property that were, essentially inhabiting the sidewalk space. And we started receiving a large number of comments from concerned citizens about that. And in many instances, those comments were not about sidewalk accessibility. But in a meaningful number of instances, those comments were in fact about sidewalk accessibility and sort of the walking experience, navigating around people in that space. Subsequent to sort of that happening, we heard from Betsy Lundy and her constituency, sort of the downtown business community, expressing much the same thing. And so in speaking with our chief of police, he felt that really if there was a desire within the community for police to address sidewalk accessibility, we would need an ordinance to do so. He felt like it was not clear in our existing ordinances that it was impermissible to place either yourself or your belongings in a way that blocked the sidewalk. And so we brought that to council. Council had lots of thoughts on that ordinance. I don't think they liked our approach, frankly, in sort of just making a deletion, which is why in your packet, city solicitor Dave Sevchek has also given you an alternative that is maybe a bit more direct and straightforward with addressing the issue. But ultimately, council wanted your input on this question and really, I think, some help in navigating how we define what that community standard is for sidewalk accessibility.
Thank you.
If I can ask a question. What was the specific concern about the folks on Cedar and First Streets?
So I think it was twofold. It was for walkers. There were instances where they were having to walk off the sidewalk in order to navigate around people. There wasn't enough walking room to navigate. And then for individuals who were in wheelchairs or using walkers or using other assistive tools to walk, the challenge was more pronounced, right? Because you can't easily roll off a sidewalk and then back on to navigate around. That was sort of the crux of the issue. Certainly we received concerns that were much broader than sidewalk accessibility, but for purposes of navigating this conversation, I think that's essentially what we're trying to balance here, accessibility versus folks' desire to be in that space.
Thank you. Any other questions for City Manager Lear?
I wonder, was there anyone like that personally stated that like I am in a wheelchair, I have a walking device that had the issue, or was it more like just a thought of?
Oh, gosh.
Just curious.
I would hate
I,
to misrepresent what we received. I mean, I would guess we received somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 24 complaints that specifically raised the issue of accessibility. But I wouldn't feel comfortable saying affirmatively that they were saying, I have had an accessibility
Mhm.
challenge versus, I'm concerned generally about that.
okay, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, I trust you won't go far.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say if you want.
I can take
I was
some.
just saying, thank you no, I'm teasing you. Thank you very much, City Manager Lear. So with that said, and that information provided, now I would like to open it up. If there are any folks here tonight that have public comment about this particular issue before we invite folks representing Downtown Bangor Partnership and the Bangor Public Library to share with us more directly their experiences, I would like to open it up. We reserve about 15 minutes at this time for any Bangor residents or other individuals directly impacted by this to share a 3-minute piece of their own feedback on this topic for our committee to review.
Hi, I'm Katie Coe. I'm a resident of Bangor. My concerns about this ordinance is that it's criminalizing behavior that I think should be treated with more compassion. These folks are in the sidewalks because they've been removed from everywhere else, and we don't have a designated place for them to be. When we remove them from the sidewalks, where are they going to be? In the street? And then we'll have to have further regulations about that. We need a place, a safe place for them to be. The sidewalk issue is relatively new. They have been hanging out for the last couple years, occasionally on the sidewalks on First and Main. I live on 4th Street. I walk through there a lot. If you walk through and you say, excuse me, folks are pretty okay. They know that they are in a public space. They know people are trying to get through. But also, when the outdoors is your home and I'm walking through your home, that's like, they should also be treated with respect. Even if they're having a bad day and they tell me to go fuck myself, that is also kind of reasonable because I am walking through their home because they do not have a place to be. Anyway, further criminalization is, I think, a terrible step. I know that they said that this will be a civil issue. Civil issues compound. Civil issues create fines. Fines create an inability to pay a fine. And what happens when you don't pay a fine? You end up incarcerated. If that's the only way we can get them in beds, that's horrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. So as you, again, it's on your packet, and as City Manager Lear shared with us, we have been asked to look at the language, and I know that we have folks here from the Bangor Public Library, I think, and the Downtown Bangor Partnership. I think it would, if it's okay with everyone, be best to bring everyone up to the table if you're comfortable, for us to have sort of an open conversation about this, and our group can ask questions and we can kind of unpack what the expectations are and how we might best answer this. Do you want to come up too? Yeah, sure.
Read on.
Pack it in. Because I think obviously these questions will likely need your expertise, I assume. Is Betsy on?
Vote to panelist. She's declined.
All right, well, hello, Ron. Hello, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome to you.
I would too, I was like, oh, snap out of it. Thank you so much. Oh, look, our city council liaison is here. Counselor Beck, you may join us when you can. We are just now going to be hearing from Ben from the Bangor Public Library. Again, you know, like Counselor Williams shared, this may have started at one part of the city, but has slowly grown to address a number of sidewalk issues. And I think it's important that we hear from folks who are interested in sharing their own experiences, make sure that we have a really well-rounded view on what our options are and why this is an important conversation to be having. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Can I ask that you folks identify yourselves, because I don't know who you are?
Yes.
Thanks.
absolutely.
I'm Ben Treat. I'm the director of the Bangor Public Library.
Thank you.
David Sepchek, city solicitor.
Good to meet you both.
Thank you. Well, so I guess I'll start by just saying that like housed people and unhoused people are all people, right? And so there's more similarities than there are differences, and that's always important to remember. But one big difference is that unhoused people are much of their life in public spaces, right? They don't have their private space to go to that I have to go to. And so things that relate to public spaces are going to relate heavily to unhoused folks. But public spaces matter, and public spaces they all have purposes. Like we set aside a space as a public space for a purpose usually. And so like as the director of a public space in Bangor, I've had to wrestle with that a lot because I know what our mission, I know what our goals are as a public library. And it's arts, culture, literacy, you know, communication tools and helping people connect with the world around them through computers and resources and everything else that you do associate with libraries. And we've had, as a public space, other things that we've had to deal with. Well, now we're talking about sidewalks, which are also a public space that also have a purpose, right? And so I don't think anybody's saying like homeless people shouldn't be in the library. Well, no, I'll take that back. There are certainly people who say homeless people shouldn't be in the library at all, right? They just aren't me. And there are certainly probably people who say, well, homeless people shouldn't be on the sidewalks at all. But I don't think that's what this proposal is about, right? It's about the manner in which we share public space together. And so acknowledging that the sidewalk is a public space, it does have a purpose and a goal. There's a reason we set aside that space is an important part of the process. Now, whether the particular ordinance that was proposed before is the right way to approach dealing with how to use the public space is a completely different question. I understand you have different tasks to share with folks, but I think it's important for me, and one thing that I've had to come to terms with in my role, have to think about, yes, we are free to all. You see that over many public library entrances, the motto, free to all. And that's different from free for all, right? Like it's right. See, yeah.
I like that.
But it is different from free for all, right? Like it's not for any purpose. It's for specific purposes. And then we try to ensure that people are able to maximize those purposes in the space. The sidewalks, it's walking, right? And so we want to maximize people's ability to use sidewalks for walking, all recognize that it's going to be put to other uses, like sidewalk art festival, or you know whatever the case may be, right? And so I think it's important to remember that when a space is closed down to unhoused populations for whatever reason, or a space is closed down, period, where unhoused populations have been, they're going to move to the next space, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind. I think having something like this as a package with an effort to identify, well, positively, where are some places that people can go, and acknowledging that, acknowledging those spaces is an important element of whatever happens. But for the library, our day-to-day experience is that we have people coming in outraged, saying, why haven't you cleared those people off your property? They assume Pierce Park is our property. And so we politely, without throwing shade at the city, say, well, that's not our property. And so then we have people who feel uncomfortable entering the library. I've had a lot of people really recently in the past 2 weeks tell me, you know, I don't feel comfortable entering the library myself. I don't feel comfortable bringing my children to the library. It is having an impact on public space that has specific purposes to have that be the site of an encampment, right? And there is a nighttime encampment on the sidewalk in front of the library. There's an impact there. It may be that this committee says, yeah, well, that's life. People are gonna have to face the consequences, right, of the world not being perfect. And so, yeah, we lose the library and we lose walking down that particular section of the sidewalk. That's important to me and feels like it's a real loss. But it may be that what we have to do is say, no, we have a principled stand that homeless people have to be able to camp on the sidewalk. That's important. The other question we have to ask ourselves, I think, is why would homeless people be sleeping on bricks on the sidewalk? What are the other options that are out there, right? Why are homeless people finding themselves identifying this as a space that they have to stay? I think that involves talking to actual unhoused people, right? I think that's probably a direction that needs to be gone in. Because it doesn't register with me that the sidewalk in front of the library is the most comfortable, the most desirable option, the quietest, the least exposed to the exhaust of tailpipes, right? It seems odd to me, and I don't understand it, right? But I think that's something that probably is worth exploring as you try to figure out how you want to approach this issue that's been presented to you by council. I guess finally, you know, I myself am pretty desensitized to the knee-jerk reaction some folks have of seeing an unhoused person and saying, gee, you know, like that kind of reaction, right? There are a lot of folks who have that reaction. There are folks who have that reaction on behalf of others and say, oh, well, you know, I'm comfortable, but this person wouldn't be. And that's kind of hearsay, right? Like that's, you know, but there are folks who have that reaction themselves on a regular basis. I'm not one of those folks. I'm pretty desensitized, right? I'm aware that folks are living in really abject conditions and I can't get to work every day and live through it if I'm not at least a little bit able to go through my day recognizing that and living with it, not feeling like it's satisfactory or acceptable, but needing to live my life every day where I work with what I'm doing, who I'm working with. Even I, who am somewhat desensitized, you know, to these reactions, have felt pretty nervous at times when I'm walking past people who are laying under tarps, or basically laying concealed under tarps. We have things that go through our head to say, why is a person concealed right here? Now I can then take my rational mind out of that and say, take myself out of that and go through my rational mind and say, this person's under a tarp because they didn't want to get rained on. They didn't want me to settle on them. They didn't want. There's lots of rational answers to that, but we are trained, and we are probably training our kids to be cautious about people who are concealing their location, who are hiding under a blanket, hiding under a tarp. If we're not training our kids to do that, we should be. To have that sort of like, wait, let me think about this reaction. For a significant subset of the population, there's going to be a sort of a reaction where people say, I'm not going down that street because I've had too many circumstances where I felt threatened, where I felt at risk, or where I have been harmed. And it was because I put myself in a dangerous situation and I shouldn't have. And so that's going to happen to folks. And I don't want that to happen as people bring their kids to the library to learn to read. I don't want people to have that happen as people bring their kids to the library for to see the Declaration of Independence in September, like whatever the event is. I don't want that to be people's reaction to accessing the library. But I realize that this is not an easy issue. And I feel like I need to come and tell you what my experience is, what I'm seeing happening, and why I see it as something that I do have, even I'm feeling a visceral reaction at times when I'm not somebody who tends to have a visceral reaction to seeing I have visceral reactions. I don't tend to have a visceral fright response to the situation, but I'm feeling it myself. I recognize that this is a real thing. This is not kind of these are my patrons that are experiencing this danger. So that's kind of the last piece that I want to say is many of these people that are on the sidewalk are also my patrons, but some are not. Some are folks who have been explicitly banned from the library for dangerous conduct, for harmful conduct, or for substance use, which is harmful to self, but not for not an attack on others, certainly. I'm conscious that we've made a separation with some of the folks that are living right next to the library in the park for a reason. We don't make a willy-nilly decision about the one that they have to leave. And so as I'm conscious that we've tried to set our boundaries, I find that we have no ability to set boundaries because the very path to the library is an encampment of people that we've said can't even come in the building anymore because of their conduct. That's what I have to share of my experience. I understand everything I've said is dismissible, right? Because there are other points of view that people have to say, other things that people want to share where they're like, oh, you're overreacting. But that is my reaction and I'm here to share.
Thank you so much for that, Ben. I really appreciate that. I'd love to provide time for questions if any folks have any questions for Ben and his experience and anything that he has to share.
I'll start, get us rolling. I'm wondering, have you seen, and I don't know if there's any sort, I know it hasn't, there's not an objective timestamp to this experience, but have you noticed a attendance shift in participation at the library since the encampment has been more present and visible in that area?
So it's been about 4 weeks, 3 weeks. We tend to keep monthly stats, so no, I don't have stats on it. I could go run those and share them because we report to ourselves monthly, but we have data. Right?
I'm sure you have some numbers you have to keep.
Right, yeah. So we have a way of gathering that data. We just don't go and look at it, on a daily basis.
Okay. Do you think that there has
been? We've had some pretty quiet days in the atrium. And some days where people have said it's quieter than normal for this time of year. I think there's a good chance, but I can look at the numbers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. And I forgive my ignorance, but I do know at one point in time there was a social worker, right, that would work in the atrium. Are they still there, or in the cafe rather? In that area?
So
sorry if I'm conflating.
No, it's fine. So there's a greeter position, and that person is kind of a lower, they're in a lower ranked position, and their responsibility is really just to say hello to people as they come in, but also to observe what's happening.
Okay.
And so if they're in the atrium and see somebody approach someone and they're kind of giving them a hard time, intervene early while de-escalation is possible, or when it's possible for a person not to ask any further before they have to escalate themselves to it. So it's important to have a presence in that space, and that's what the greeter position does. They're not a social worker.
Okay, I'm sorry that I.
In that way, but we also have a social worker position. Now that position, rather than maintaining order in a space or being responsible for monitoring conduct, is more responsible for connecting the library with a network of services that are out there, and then recognizing as people come in That's a new face. Hey, my name's Olivia. How can I, how can I help you? Or I don't know how she does the interaction. I don't hang over her shoulder, but like, she's trained in this, right? Yeah, social work. So like it does that interaction, right? And then tries to help connect people with services. And so I think of her as both a presence that helps ensure that the library is being a caring, supportive, responsible space, while also exerting pressure out of the atrium and towards the actual resources that are in the community. Because the people who are actually doing the best helping work, like the CHCSs and PCHDs and all the different organizations, are not physically present in the library. They have their own areas that they work in, right? And they're really important, but connecting people with those services in a way that is enduring, and then also recognizing when PCHD comes back and says, hey, I'm a case manager for so-and-so. Has anyone seen them? I have their housing voucher. Olivia is able to make that connection too. Our social workers able to make that connection.
Yeah.
So different kinds of positions, but yes, we do have a couple of positions that are heavily based on reacting to the current situation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think your question, why the library got my brain thinking of that, like, because that is a good point, there is something specific about, and I'm not making this correlation in my mind because of it. It just got
I
me
can
thinking.
tell you, just go to any service center city, any major city in the country, walk into the biggest public library branch and you'll see a large unhoused population. It's nationwide. If you build a palace 3 blocks down from the library and say, this is for unhoused people, there's still going to be unhoused people in the library. It's just, I'm not sure exactly what it is. Part of it is that we're resource rich with things that are really valuable to unhoused folks, like computer equipment, electricity for charging devices. There's these resources that are really valuable to the entire population are also really valuable to an unhoused population, and perhaps more because they don't have a home to charge the device in,
Right.
or a home to store a computer.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Shane.
I would imagine, and it's probably a testament to the environment you create there, that people feel safe at the library too.
I hope so.
That innate human need for safety might be driving, maybe they're not inside, maybe they're out on the sidewalk, but because they know that is a safe space for them to be.
Yeah.
When we pursue things like this, that makes it an unsafe place for them to be.
That's what I was thinking. I agree with you.
I also have a clarified question. In the city code, chapter 174,
I'm glad you're up
loitering,
here.
174-1 prohibits, it says, it shall be unlawful for any person to loiter, loaf, wander, stand, or remain idle, either alone or in concert with others, in a public place in such a manner as to obstruct any public street, highway, sidewalk, blah, blah, blah. This already exists. Why are we here?
Yeah, that does exist. And the proposed ordinance change that's in front of the council and was referred to you is the sidewalks ordinance that really has to do with materials. The proposed change that's been referred to you is about materials because the loitering provision's already there. And it really is a balancing the needs of those residents who are unhoused and the needs of the city to maintain passable sidewalks, including for those with mobility challenges and including maintaining free and unimpeded access on those sidewalks to businesses and places like the public library. So the city council referred this item to you for your review and advice on where does this proposed change strike the right balance, or in your opinions, should that balance be somewhere else? So the change that's in front of you is a simple change to an existing ordinance that's been around for decades. That's 257-4 of the sidewalks ordinance. It says that a person can't block, occupy, or obstruct a city sidewalk, esplanade, or street to store materials.
Yeah, can I just interrupt you? I've read it. I was in the meeting as well. I guess I'm just confused about why we need this secondary when we clearly have a part of the code that says people cannot obstruct. I would assume that people cannot obstruct applies to people's possessions. I think when it was written, the one that is at question here is literally about construction material, right? It's not about anyone's belongings. I think that would apply under this part of the code.
The reason why the change has been proposed is for clarity. The loitering ordinance is pretty clear about people, but doesn't say anything about materials.
My question then is why wouldn't we ask the council to revisit 174-1?
Well, there have been complaints about the proposed change being a repurposing of an ordinance that in its title says it's for construction purposes. And so the only change that is being proposed is to eliminate the words for construction purposes so that it has general applicability. Sidewalks are for walking, and so the proposed change would say a person can't block a sidewalk with materials, period. And at least one counselor has, and other people have indicated, well, a problem with repurposing this ordinance, which was drafted in the construction context for general applicability, and they didn't like it. And that's there was also a sentence proposed to be added that just clarifies more that the police department or the code enforcement office may enforce the ordinance. So the enforcement anticipated would be to direct people to move their materials from the sidewalk. There isn't any criminal enforcement that is contemplated. If anticipated enforcement would be if the people wouldn't move their materials from the sidewalk. If they refuse to, then there's a possibility of a small civil penalty for refusal to comply. The reason why the legal department prepared an alternative standalone for your review was in the case where you don't think that proposed ordinance change strikes the right balance, or if you have a problem with it being repurposed, that's why the standalone alternative was prepared for your review as well. And that one would be a new ordinance section 257-7 that would be its own provision, and it would say that as city sidewalks are intended for free, safe, and unimpeded pedestrian travel on them by members of the public, no person shall occupy, block, obstruct, or partially obstruct a city sidewalk or esplanade for the storage of materials. So it says the same thing that the other ordinance already says, but it's in its own section and it's prepared new. And because it was a standalone, we also added, for clarity, the subsection A that would say this section does not apply to temporary lines formed on sidewalks in order to access a building, or to persons, wheelchairs, or strollers occupying a sidewalk or esplanade in order to view a parade, which is pretty much the understanding anyway under the other ordinance, but it's in the standalone. If that's a place where you think might be a better balance to say that we think that we would recommend the standalone over the proposed change to the existing ordinance. We also put in under subsection B a specific provisions about enforcement. It just says the police department will enforce this section. The first and preferred method of enforcing a violation of this section is for the police department to direct that materials be moved from the sidewalk or esplanade by the individual who placed the materials if that individual can be readily identified. And that would be anticipated to be the enforcement that would be used. It does go on if the individual is readily identified but refuses to move the materials from the sidewalk or esplanade. This draft says that person is subject to a civil penalty of not less than $50 and no more than $100. And then it also says in the event of a second violation within a 6-month period, the civil penalty shall be no less than $100 and no more than $250. These are all civil penalties. And then the last thing the enforcement provision says, in the event the individual who placed the materials cannot be readily identified by an on-scene police department officer, any applicable city policy pertaining to removal of materials on public property may be followed, which there's already a policy in that regard, so it refers to that policy. And in a way that could be also a future policy if it gets changed.
May I just interrupt with a clarifying question to this? So we obviously have seen the, executive summary that was in the, obviously the original packet for the city council. We heard the discussion materials are, and I'm paraphrasing this for all of us, but also mostly myself. The materials are the issue. What you're saying is that 2257-7 could be something that we choose to include that's creates more clarity because of those subsections, because that, and I'm so sorry if I missed it, that wasn't in the original, right? The
That's
original
not in
was
front of
just,
council right now.
okay, I
That
wanted
was
to clarify
drafted
that.
For purposes of providing options. and
Sure.
Alternatives if you don't,
Sure.
if your position is that you don't think the balance is struck the right way with the
Sure.
proposed change. That was, you could recommend the proposed ordinance change. You could recommend the proposed ordinance change with suggested changes that you
Mhm,
wanna suggest. You could instead recommend the standalone alternative.
mhm.
You could recommend the standalone alternative with any suggested changes that you wanna make. You could also recommend any other proposed draft that you might want to make.
Mhm.
And so standalone is for purposes of alternatives.
Thank you.
But the only one that's in front of the council right now is the proposed one.
257-4.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to say that out loud because I think it's important for all of us as we're listening to this feedback to understand that there are alternatives, but it's also, important to keep in mind, I think that Ben got to the real crux of the issue, which is what are we talking about here, right? Are we talking about obstruction of sidewalk and what the language is, which is, to be clear, what we are here to do, look at this ordinance in terms of accessibility of a sidewalk. However, without it being partnered with a discussion or some sort of understanding that this is going to impact folks who are living close to a sidewalk, what other things might we need to include? So, like you said, City Solicitor Sobczak, that an opportunity to include something that will talk about what that enforcement actually looks like, or identify what that obstruction actually means is important. I know that I personally have some questions and thoughts that I would like to add, but I also recognize that I cut you off. Vice Chair Boyd, so go ahead.
So if I just may, Betsy Lundy is now online and Catherine has raised her hand.
Thank you very much. Betsy, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for being here and being available. I will give the floor to Shane and then Katie's question, and then we would love to hear your feedback and insight as well. Thank you.
Would be in line there.
Sorry to not let this go, but again, I'm gonna go back to 174-1. 174-1 does also have a definition section, 174-2, and 174-3, which is order to disperse. It says when any person causes or commits any of the conditions enumerated in subsection 174-1, herein a police officer or any law enforcement officer shall order that person to stop causing or committing such conditions and to move on or disperse. Any person who fails or refuses to obey such order shall be guilty of a violation of this chapter. Again, I don't know that we need to add anything new. It's already right here. And I understand wanting to put it under the sidewalk section, but I believe the current, what is in there now, was specifically written for construction and interference with sidewalks. This is about loitering in a sidewalk. I would think that this would fit under loitering. So my wish would be that in our response, excuse me, maybe we recommend to the council that we revisit 174-1 instead of trying to add something new, which I get the idea of trying to make it more clear, but I think in the context of the entire code makes it more muddy. Because then you have two sections that are essentially saying the same thing with different language.
But not saying the same thing. And how do you figure out what supersedes which? Cause this one
Right.
comes with a $50 fine and that one doesn't.
This one is about materials. The loitering one is about people.
Well, it
Okay.
does say the creation of. So, and items belong to people, right? Items aren't gonna just get up and walk into the sidewalk themselves. They belong to people.
But we are here to talk about the material specifically. And if we did that, that would be a whole other thing to readdress. I agree with you that like, it's sort of like, you know,
I mean,
which one?
you could go to the other one and add materials for clarity, but but you could also add, just take off for construction purposes on this one too. That's what's been proposed, because it was a change, the substance of the thing was
Yeah.
already in it. It just, so that was what was chosen, but it's not the only way that could address the situation or try to balance the situation. But again, it's for purposes of clarity, and it addresses materials. It's the materials that I understand that the police department don't feel is particularly clear in the loitering ordinance, that it addresses materials.
Yeah, thank you. Katie,
How about we let Betsy go first, because you might answer something I had a question on, so I defer.
thanks, Katie.
Hi, thanks everyone for inviting me into the meeting, and I'm sorry that I cannot be there in person. Can everyone hear me? Let me start there.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. I apologize that I can't be there in person, but I did really want to attend and have an opportunity to speak to this issue because it is really of considerable importance to the people who are regular users of downtown and also impacts people who are the casual visitor to downtown. And it's a little bit challenging for me, for the organization, kind of the direction the conversation has gone. Because I will say that this organization has advocated for years for passable sidewalks, and it has never been about unhoused populations and unhoused populations' belongings. It's always been about sidewalk accessibility, whatever the impediment is. We spent 3 years advocating for snow removal of sidewalks in downtown and beyond downtown, the walk zones for all the schools, because we really believe that sidewalk safety and passability is an issue of equity for folks who don't have cars, for folks who are too young to drive. In an urban environment, there's a lot going on at the city level and through multiple organizations to increase the walkability of our city and encourage people to get out from behind the wheel and be pedestrians in downtown and become commuters on foot. So I think this initiative really exists outside of all of these other issues that we are talking about. And I do think right now, as a municipality, we have a tendency to look at everything through this one particular lens. All that said, I don't think you can say that this particular issue does not impact the unhoused population significantly at this moment in time. So I don't want to pretend that that isn't an issue as well, but I do want to just stress that the issues of and I will tell you too, we also advocate annually with our, Public Works Department for sidewalk maintenance and repairs, for broken bricks and for weed control and all the things that make it difficult. And I know the question has come up is, how often is this an issue? And I can tell you that, although you don't hear maybe from all of the folks that it's impacting, it is a pretty common issue that we hear about, that people have difficulty getting from point A to point B. Around some of these physical impediments, which was why we introduced the ordinance last fall. And I will say also too, not to jump all over the place, but we have tour operators who give walking tours of downtown, and we probably give about 50 tours a year to people on American Cruise Lines. If you've ever seen them walking around, many of them are I'm trying to think of the right word because I just met with Eastern Area Agency on Aging to get the right word because I was going to say elderly, but I know there's a different term now that people are using. But people who are older and they do not, many of them use devices to get around. There's scooters, there's wheelchairs, there's walkers. And for those who aren't using them, a lot of them, you know, they still have difficulty getting around. We had to work with them on issues of like where their little tour bus picks up and drops off. When they first started coming, you know, I'd kind of tail around and watch people walking. And I remember seeing people spend about 20 minutes trying to get to the Bangor Historical Society from Main Street because that slight hill incline was so difficult for them to pass and we got them to reroute so that they could drop off at the top of the hill rather than the bottom of the hill. So we've been watching these mobility issues, and I will say for the tour operators who are giving these pedestrian tours, they do run into big challenges. The library is a shining jewel in our city. It has art galleries. It has a lot of historic artifacts. It's just plain a beautiful place and a place that we like to show off and that the tour operators like to show off. But it can be really difficult getting into and out of the library when there's people obstructing the sidewalk, which actually was not as much of an issue last summer as it looks like it's going to be this summer. And why we were we've been so vehement about addressing it now, because I do not want to see what happened on Cedar Street last year happen in front of the library, which is an even more heavily pedestrian zone. And it does tend to escalate when you allow one, and we've seen it when you allow one person to do it, then another person comes and another person comes. And then suddenly you have this big like 20, 30 person issue to deal with. When in reality, if you had just told the first person like, hey, you can't lay on the sidewalk here, you can't leave your belongings on the sidewalk here, it would have cut the issue off entirely. And so we're constantly advocating to the police department, because I would agree with, I think your name was Shane, is it Shane who was speaking earlier? Yeah, I think we have all the ordinances that we need on the books. For whatever reason, our police department does not feel comfortable enforcing them. And I think what they're really looking for here is direction from city council, who ultimately is looking to you for direction about whether or not we prioritize the accessibility of sidewalks in a way that they feel comfortable enforcing the ordinances that we have. And in fact, I will say that when we kind of introduced two separate ordinance suggestions. One was about leaving property around, and the other one was about sitting and lying on sidewalks, which is a big issue. And it's kind of, the two things seem a little melded together here. But ultimately, for whatever angle is taken, we really need to maintain sidewalks as passable for pedestrians.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate your insight. And I wanted to punt it back to Katie. I don't know, Katie, if that answered your question, and then before we open it up, obviously, to additional questions over here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Betsy. That was actually really helpful. It did answer part of my question, because I'm on this committee. I come from a healthcare lens. So I do know very much. I think about, walkers, those with strokes, even those with children, safety of sidewalks is so incredibly important. We don't want them breaking anything or falling into the street. So I do understand what you're saying with that. And so my question is for Councilor Beck. I think he's over there in the corner somewhere. I missed the last meeting because I was sick, but I did see in the notes about you did have the homeless committee was created. And I don't know if this is, I know it's been established. Have they met yet? Is this part of the agenda? Because safety is a priority, but I think this is multifactorial issue. And I do think that the the unhoused population on the sidewalks is an issue that has to be resolved too. And so I know that's like sidebar, but I'm just curious where we are with that committee and if this is going to be part of one of their tasks to look at to help with this situation?
Yep, so we're in the process of doing the interviews to seat the committee. The way the ordinance is written, their first task is a long-term strategy. So before they can do anything else, as the ordinance is currently written, you know, I guess if I understand your question, is this something that could be referred to them? And I don't believe, and again, speaking for myself, but my reading of the ordinance is this is not something that you would refer to them. I mean, they may pick it up as part of their overall conversation about that long-term strategy, but it's not like something that we can just hand off to them, at least in their first year of operation, until they finish that first task.
So it sounds like it's going to take a while for the committee to be seated with the plans for strategy. So it almost sounds like there is I don't want to make anybody feel anxious, but it sounds like, you know, with summer coming, that we have two issues simultaneously. We have sidewalk safety, which is a priority, but we also have those that are using the sidewalks for living conditions, which we also need to rectify. So if we can't go to the housing committee, who's going to be helping with this part of the conversation? Because I know we'll get to voting, but I do feel very strongly, as the guest stated, that just putting on $50, $100, $250 fines is not going to solve the problem. So what is the next strategy for solving this issue? I don't think changing the verbiage of the ordinance is going to all of a sudden change this issue.
Thank you, Katie. I do fully agree with you. I do think that is the task at hand, right? Regardless of where we put the language, where we put the word material, sure, that is our task, but I think that the council is looking to us to determine if there are ways that we can help shape this ordinance in a way that does feel enforceable, right, to a degree, so that there is accessibility for all individuals who want to use a sidewalk, while simultaneously understanding that folks live near sidewalks and they do own things near sidewalks. And where is the balance of, I hate to use the word fair here, but like in terms of sharing this shared space, how do we make it so that folks have accessibility and ease of transportation, while also recognizing that I don't think any of us would be able to sit here in this meeting and say, you can't be here, but you have nowhere else to go. Not our problem, because that's why we're here, right? We want to create a holistic approach to creating equity for the city. So I think it's a little difficult, because at the end of the day, to Katie's point, we're not here to create a homelessness strategy for folks living near the sidewalk. We're here to look, is this equitable? Where's the right place to be, right? And how do we suggest to council what those amendments might look like in a way that is very clear and enforceable with equity and intent of recognizing humanity and not getting people stuck in a cycle of civil suits and incarceration and so on and so forth. Betsy, I see your hand. Mark was in the queue. I apologize. So I'm gonna throw that over to Mark and then we'll come back to you. Thank you.
I think that in no way would anybody say that our sidewalks should not be accessible.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that would be an absurdity. I think, as I'm understanding, I think that since construction materials have been removed from the issue, materials, I think, my hunch is that that's basically talking about materials that the unhoused folks are using and are having on the sidewalk. I think that maybe we need to define materials in a better way, or maybe we need to address the issue head on. I think as I was reading through these documents, I was very disturbed, because each of the documents talks about unhoused folks can't be on private property, they can't be on public property, they can't be on property that belongs near another facility in the city. So where do they go? You know, it's, I think we've seen that before, that each time an area was cleared, the folks moved to another area because they had no choice, that they have nowhere to go. So I think I really echo what Katie was saying, that really it is two separate issues. And it would certainly seem to me that the issue of homelessness will ultimately need to be kicked to the committee that's being formed. And if we were to define what materials are, I think it's probably a fairly simple determination. We want to have sidewalks accessible for all.
Thanks, Mark. Agree. Betsy.
Yeah, I just want to just keep trying to pull us back to the point that I understand that issues of houselessness is something that needs to be solved and thought about. But I don't think that we have to wait on solving the issue of sidewalk accessibility. We don't have to hinge that on solving issues of houselessness. They're really two separate issues. One is really complex. There is no doubt. People have been talking, I was gonna say people have been talking about it for years, but it's been an ongoing issue that has certainly escalated in recent years, let's put it that way. There's a lot of people working on that issue, but that doesn't mean that until we have a solution to one thing, we should sacrifice another thing. We really have to think about what the intent of a sidewalk is. What is the purpose of a sidewalk? And if people want to change the purpose of a sidewalk, we can look into creating ordinances that actually make them, storage facilities. But I don't know that that's what people want to do. I don't think that that's the will of the people. I don't think people want to make sidewalks impassable. And on some level, we're really muddying the waters by merging these two issues.
Thank you, Betsy. Suzette, and then Adam.
So I do attend the Livable Communities Committee, which is a Bangor committee as well, led by Ian Craig. A big part of that committee is walkability of the sidewalks. And, the importance, it's Bangor was designated Livable Communities City back in 2015. So people do walkability studies and how important it is for especially older people to get out and walk. I live in a neighborhood where a lot of people walk. People in their 80s walk every day, year round. And so I just think we need the sidewalks to be accessible for everybody, to be able to walk. There was a woman this morning that had, was obviously visually impaired, had a cane, and she was walking by the library and almost fell into the street. So, these are things that are happening. So I just think, a sidewalk is a sidewalk. It's meant to be walked on. And also the library, how much of the library is taxpayer funded by the city of Bangor taxpayers?
70%.
70%. So these are taxpayers that need access to their library. I do hear from people that do not go to the Bangor Library anymore, they go to Brewer. And there is a fear there, whether you think it's justified or not. I think it's a valid concern, and I think it's seriously impacting the Bangor taxpayers, everybody coming to Bangor. It's a serious issue. A sidewalk is meant to be safe. It's right here from the Livable Communities, safe, accessible, well-maintained sidewalks are a fundamental community investment that enhances public health and maximizes social capital. So it's important for a sidewalk to be walkable. It's the purpose of a sidewalk. And if the police need this, so they will finally enforce an ordinance, I think that's important. And I think I'm fed up, and I think I represent a lot of people that are fed up too, that the sidewalk needs to be accessible. Handicapped people, I've had people in my family in wheelchairs, I thought that this committee is supposed to be about accessibility for those people as well. So, you know, you have to have ordinances, rules and laws, and they have to be enforced. Otherwise, it gets out of control. And so I'm pretty adamant that this does need to be done and it needs to be enforced.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah, so I'm very conflicted with this. I mean, I get the accessibility part and I hear that. But I also just feel for our homeless here. I know it's a separate issue, but like when we talk about materials and when we're talking about the sidewalk, we're not talking about other things. We're talking about people's belongings. And another thing is that what happens when their things are taken and that's their entire life and they have nothing left, and or what they don't have, they lose everything that they already have. And I would like to see something where they can still get their stuff back, or in some capacity in that. But I mean, I also agree that we need clear sidewalks as well, but these are human beings as well, so.
Thank you, Adam. Right.
Is there stuff not allowed to be anywhere on the library property? Or is it just the sidewalks?
So the park and the sidewalk, we don't have any say so over. On library property, we don't allow unattended property. And so what happens, that could be inside the building or outside the building. If it's outside the building and there's a shopping cart, we don't just like take it and throw it in the dumpster or whatever like that, you know. We try to figure out whose it is and we say, hey, you know, we don't allow unattended property. You know, we figure it out. And sometimes it takes a couple of days. Sometimes people take and leave their shopping cart at the library for a couple of days. And when they come back, we're like, oh, okay, oh, that was so-and-so. You know, we didn't see what was left. And for inside the building, we also have a practice, which is that we take property that's been left in the library atrium or wherever, usually the atrium, and move it to bins in the back and the staff only area, and label what day it was left. And so then we wait a couple of weeks and then we throw out the belongings if it's been a couple of weeks and nobody's come for the belongings. Sometimes people will leave behind stuff because they had to get away from a situation. They saw somebody who, you know, they didn't want to be around for some reason and they might have really good reasons, right? So they head out and they leave their belongings behind, and we want to make sure that we give every opportunity to reunite the property. But that's part of the reason I'm going on at length at this, is that that's the kind of thinking we have to go through with a 60,000 square foot facility, right? Imagine a whole city. Like there's a lot of thinking that has to go into that kind of program. And so it's important to do it. I think it's important conversation to have. It's just, it is very complicated. It's a lot of work that we put in just trying to manage not just tossing people's belongings, but also not leaving them just kind of cluttering the atrium either.
I think that we must consider one another as a collective. That's the basis of DEI and what our committee is here to do. So the concern regarding lack of accessibility to sidewalks should be addressed, I feel. With that said, I'm in favor of either the amendment or our various options, which I have questions about. But I too am curious if there's going to be other conversations happening about identifying alternative locations. But I know that part of a grander conversation today, I think it's important that we do focus on the accessibility of sidewalks, and in my it's something that we should.
Interesting. Teresa.
I probably look like a tomato, but I just felt like I should share my thoughts. I'm a nervous talker. I think that it's honestly almost offensive to act as if this isn't an issue of like the unhoused. I think that this is a direct result, and we need to see that, of like closing their homes, encampments, and just, you know, displacing them. And where are they supposed to go? I personally don't think that we can even address this until that's addressed, because to what a couple others have said and about the belongings, I appreciate that like you will hold on to them and the great lengths that you go through for that. But if this is like enforceable and they're not, like you mentioned something, if the police officer can't identify the person, they'll take next steps for removal. But this is like all they have. Like this might be like their entire home in like a bag. And I just don't see how we can address one without, I mean, they're human beings. So I really just think they need to go hand in hand personally.
Thank you, Teresa. Shane.
Just wanna say, it feels a little bit like we've been put between a rock and a hard place here, because we can't, like, there is no happy medium to this, right? Like something's gonna have to give in one direction or the other. And we've been asked to figure out what is the least upsetting way to do that. And that just doesn't feel right, right? Like we can only make a recommendation based off of what we know to be true now, not what we anticipate may be true when there's a homeless committee. And I agree, like I don't think it's appropriate for us to participate in this at this point without having an actual plan for how to address what is the root issue. And I do want to recognize, I hear Betsy, what you're saying. I agree. I think it's not just people's stuff, right? It's also like broken bricks and weeds that grow and trash that gets left by people who are just walking downtown and can't find a trash can, right? Like there are all kinds of factors that play into this. It shouldn't just be about telling unhoused people that they can't stay on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right? Like how would changing this impact if I wanted to go and protest in front of the federal building, but on the sidewalk, which is city property? What if someone comes along and says, you're impeding my sidewalk? But what's my First Amendment right? To protest. If I step out of the way, that might be good enough for me, but that person might say, no, I feel unsafe walking past you because of what you're protesting. And there's just a lot of conflict here, and I don't think it's appropriate for us at this time to make a recommendation.
And thank you, Shane, thank you. And I do just want to say that the objective for tonight as a recommendation for our committee is to say, we do not think, we have options, right? We do not think it should pass with this language about materials, or we can make amendments that are going to address the sidewalk issue while creating as much psychological safety and opportunity for folks that have their belongings near the sidewalk as possible. I fully agree that if we were to address this amendment as it stands, we do need to address what does obstruction of materials actually mean? What does obstructing it look like? For instance, the ADA recommendation is that you have 36 inches open on a sidewalk. That is the law in terms of how the individuals that use accessibility and mobility devices need 36 inches. Okay, so we have 30, do we say beyond 36 inches? Do we create specificities that make it feel enforceable for police to address, but also recognize that you aren't always going to be completely out of the sidewalk. And sometimes you can't step into the road because that's more dangerous. And if you do have your belongings, is there a process of a strike system? Instead of saying, we told you once, here's a $50 fine, we told you twice, here's a $250 fine, is it a recognizable scaffolding so that we're able to identify, help, engage? What happens to the belongings? I think that is a great question. We don't have to say yay or nay. We can say yes with these amendments, yes if we address these issues, no entirely. We're hearing all the different sides of this conversation because it's an important conversation to have. And personally, I think the entire reason advisory committees exist is because this type of nuanced, in the trenches, weedy conversations, the counselors don't have time for this. So if they're going to be doing city business, they should have a really well thought out opportunity to hear from people who are living in this world, who understand the nuance and say, yes, here is a recommendation that's going to address the issue while still having humanity and understanding what those needs are and being specific in these pieces so that it doesn't just feel like a broad stroke, because that's what gets us into trouble. That's what gets us into lawsuits. That's what gets us into issues, right? When we don't have that nuanced definition. And I think that's what we're here to do. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Suzette. I did see Councilor Lear with her hand raised, as well as Betsy, and I do obviously want to encourage, we always encourage conversation from the general public during these conversations as well. We have individuals here too. So I want to keep us moving as well, because the fact of the matter is it's already gone to first reading. It's gonna go to second reading regardless of what we say. We can say, here's our recommendation. We should say something, though. This is a great opportunity for us to be able to share something at second reading.
I just didn't want to lose the thread on the storage of property issues. Your packet does have a copy of the city's policy regarding
the ordinance though?
Storage of property. I think Dave's new draft does reference the
Yeah,
storage of property.
It references it, the
Policy.
ordinance that's in front of the council now is just
Yeah.
a slight change to an already existing ordinance.
And I would say, just in my own opinion, that might be a place where you want to make additional recommendations as well, to say, you know, yes, in addition to referencing the policy, maybe the policy should say this about the storage of things, you know.
Okay.
It should, you know,
Thank
offer
you.
hours or duration of holding as sort of additional protections, if that were something that was of interest to the
Thank you.
committee.
I did not mean to talk over you. I apologize. I just wanted to be clear, that thread of property is just our general rule, but it's not in the ordinance.
It is not in the ordinance. No, this is a city policy that exists
Right.
by way of our own internal
Because it
ability
doesn't
to
say it-
create policies.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize. City solicitor subject, it's not in the ordinance now,
The item that got referred to you is a proposed very minute change to an ordinance.
yeah,
The policy that Councilor Lear is referring to is an internal policy having to do with disposal of materials that may be in different places. The ordinance change is not about anything having to do with disposal of materials. The anticipated enforcement would be, you know, you have to move the materials off the sidewalk.
thank you. Betsy and then Suzette.
I was just gonna say like a couple of things. One, when we launched our ambassador program, one thing that really surprised us was that the city does have no policy on what to do with recovered unattended property, because our ambassadors always defer to city policy on that. And that was, you know, the only city department that we found that had an unattended property policy was the bus, or that was the BAT, which I thought was really interesting. But again, I still think that's a separate issue from what we're talking about here. I think it's really easy to get lost in the weeds. I think the city has been talking for a very long time about, you know, how do we help our houseless population? Going to continue to go on. I understand the inclination to want to defer to the moment when there's a solution for, okay, if they're not allowed to store their property on a sidewalk, where are they allowed to store that? But that could be a year down the road. And that's a year of people not being able to walk down the sidewalk. And I understand that right now it is concentrated in front of the library in Harlow Street, but we're talking about all sidewalks. We're talking about not just downtown sidewalks. We're talking about all sidewalks everywhere in the entire city. And once you start to allow something to happen, it is going to increase and it is going to escalate. And we've seen it already, and it's just going to get worse. And at that point, you're going to have a really difficult problem on your hands. Right now, I don't think that we're meeting ADA standards. If you look at, you know, Katie brought up the ADA requirements of 36 inches of passability. I I don't think we have that in a lot of places and spaces throughout time. I don't understand why we can't prioritize, like why there's only one group's, perceived needs getting prioritized over accessibility for everybody else. And I don't know why the inclination is towards allowing the situation to continue and likely escalate for an undefined amount of time until some other solution is reached, because you are depriving people of equity when you block a sidewalk.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Betsy. Suzette.
That was similar what I was gonna say is about handicapped people, accessibility. I mean, isn't this setting us up for a lawsuit because Americans with Disabilities Act? I mean, if you, I guess I don't understand the reasoning either. Why would we want people to block a sidewalk? I'm a regular walker. I walk 2 miles pretty much every day in Bangor on the sidewalks. And there is a homeowner that is creating a huge mess around his house. And I know he's been notified by the city, and he is you better believe he's gonna encroach on that sidewalk if nothing's done about this. So, I mean, it's gonna happen, I agree with Betsy, throughout the city. And then we are gonna have a huge mess, and that should be more about equity. And like I said, livable communities, a big part of that is the walkability of the city. Like I said, elderly neighbors that walk. I mean, the sidewalk is a sidewalk. It has to be clear. It has to be like we get, if you put something on your sidewalk, you're gonna get a note, like it's for sale or it's free. You're gonna get a note from the city that it has to be removed. I mean, I've seen that happen before too. So I think it's pretty straightforward. A sidewalk is a sidewalk. It needs to be accessible for handicapped people, people that walk. A lot of people do not have cars. I have relatives that don't have cars. They walk everywhere in Bangor. So I think it's pretty cut and dry. The sidewalk needs to be clear. It needs to be accessible.
Thank you.
For all people.
Katie, go ahead.
That's not working. So as Suzette said, we already have a solution. They put tickets on mattresses that are on the side of the road, tickets on electronics that people put out in front of their houses. There is a solution already. We don't need to make more laws. But I do think that there is a 3-pronged solution that you guys can suggest. The city could set up a safe storage of property system where things are labeled, they're safe, they are delivered to the resident where they're at once they are located. A day program that I believe the city was already referencing the other day.
Yeah.
Which we obviously know that the library is attractive to people. What are the things that we can replicate in a day program that would allow folks to be there instead of in the library? This is something we can do. It is, as this is a moment of crisis and we want to move immediately, the council could move quickly and set that up. And then we need a safe place for an encampment for them. Where will they go? They ended up here because they closed the railroad tracks. Before the railroad tracks, they closed the Hope House. We have had them in places that are more remote and more acceptable, and we have gotten complaints. They will need a place to go. If we set up a safe place for them to be, then they will most likely, if we make it attractive, if we make sure that we have garbage disposal, if we make sure that we have porta potties, people do not want to be sleeping on brick, as Ben said. We could give them better options. I don't think we need to have new laws to be able to do that. I think a 3-pronged approach, it's going to cost money, but it's already costing us money. It's gonna cost us more money when the police are going out and using their man hours to enforce something like this. It's gonna cost us more money when we have Public Works going out and removing these belongings. It's gonna cost more money and it's gonna cause distress, and then these belongings are gonna be lost to these people. And that's all they have. Anyway.
Thank you.
I think there are solutions.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Hamilton. I've been a 40-year resident of the city of Bangor. And just as I feel about institutions I'm affiliated with beyond the community, I think of this as our community. And I love the phrase, we've got to be thinking about the city as an integrated whole. I thought that was very expressive of the sense of inclusion of this committee. By the way, Chair, members of the committee, you're having an excellent discussion. There are a couple of things that to me bring it back to the question at bar. And the question at bar is what to do about materials associated with folks who will be using the city sidewalk. I happen to be fortunate enough to be over in the Fairmont district, and I drive down Cedar Street pretty regularly to get to work. There's a lot going on for downtown businesses in terms of access by their customers to the businesses. And we're feeling a bit threatened, and we're feeling like we're not being listened to. And so I like the fact that in this conversation, there's some sense that there needs to be balance of all the constituencies in Bangor. I think Betsy has done a good job of trying to bring it back to a focus on sidewalks. I would say that one of the most basic rights that we hold is the First Amendment right to protest. That's not the question tonight, because that is protected. The Constitution makes that clear. Speaking of the Constitution, there is very recent Supreme Court precedent. City of Grants Pass versus Johnson. It is clear that communities have the right to say, you can't sleep, you can't camp, you can't loiter, or you can decide that you don't want to do any of those things. I like to think of Bangor as a community that was on the move. When you think about how we've had opportunities to bring public to this community, like the waterfront concerts, it's happened because there's been a shared community commitment to make Bangor a better place. I think we're facing one of the most challenging issues. My wife and I went to Australia and New Zealand recently. You see it there. There's a beautiful, I was telling Ben, there's a beautiful Victoria Library in Melbourne that is just gorgeous. There are issues there. It is because the library is a safe place. It's a place where there's resources. People like to read. They like to learn. They like to better themselves. But I think the sidewalk passability question is foundational. It's part of having a civil society. I think Suzette said it well. If you're going to have a livable community, you've got to be able to use for exercise, for betterment, the opportunity to be on the streets. And I don't think this is a linear progression of this issue. My goodness, if it's linear, somebody's learned something about this that a lot of us have been missing for a long time about the unhoused issue. It's not linear. But if you don't take steps towards addressing the needs of the collective, I'll come back to that, then the city is not progressing. And I don't want to be in a community that's not progressing. I want to see change. Change is not easy. It's sometimes very hard. But we need to change the dynamic. And yes, there does need a place, need to be a place to be able to serve the unhoused in this community. That is a very present question. But that can't be resolved in tonight's discussion. And the chair has done a great job of bringing the committee back to the question of what to do about the streets. And I think there are two aspects, as Betsy said. There's the aspect, and Dave has said, there's the aspect of how people in their own conduct can affect the passability of streets. That's already addressed. I agree. That's already on the books. But there is this question of what about materials that are used by people? And I agree that has two prongs. I would not want my stuff thrown out. I don't care if it's in my house, if it's in my backyard, if it's in my garage. If it's on the street and I have an opportunity to get it out of the street or the sidewalk without affecting the passability. What I think is important at this juncture is we recognize there is going to be a solution for how the unhoused are served in this community. I respect and appreciate the passion for serving the unhoused, but there is a present issue with materials blocking the sidewalks in public spaces, in public places, in public assets that should be enjoyed by all members of the community. Let's not serve one group to the exclusion of others. Balance. And I think this committee is doing a great job of researching the issues of balance. And so I would come back to the question, could you give a recommendation? In response to the concern that we're making law, if I heard the city solicitor correctly, we're gonna delete 3 words from a city ordinance. That's not really making law. And the one tradition in the law that's really important is that the law should be accessible to the public. This, I think, takes a somewhat antiquated approach to just saying it's only construction materials that can affect passability on sidewalks. No, that's not true. That's not the modern experience. It can be anyone's materials that could affect passability. So I just wanted to applaud the committee for doing its work, for remembering that it's the collective. And so if we can balance the collective needs, I see the passion of this committee for a solution to the in-house. That's coming. That's going to be a tough one, but it's coming. And so come back to the question of the sidewalks and the passability associated with materials within the sidewalks. Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it. Okay, I know that we have so many discussions. I feel like this is starting to snowball, and I think that I see that there's another individual that wants to speak, and we have set the precedent that individuals can speak. But I want to be mindful of our time, of the actual task at hand. So I would like to include the individual to speak, because obviously equity, and it's what we're here for. And then I would like to, for any speaker that feels so sorry, you two have been stuck up here all night, if you would like to recuse yourself or at any means leave, then we can actually have a discussion about what our options are for either passage or amendment to this for the city's second reading next week.
Hi, I'm Acadia Miller. I'm not a Bangor resident, but I spend the majority of my time here, so. So just to be completely clear, we're talking about removing the words for construction purposes. Okay, in my opinion, removing those words does kind of make it about the unhoused. I mean, like, what are we really talking about here? It does, and because of that, I have a major issue with the whole fine situation. The $50 to $100 could be devastating. I mean, and the unhoused population doesn't have that. That's like, yeah, I don't either currently. It's like multiple days of food. And I just disagree that I just think that removing that specific phrasing does make it about the unhoused population. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Acadia. Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts.
I'm sorry.
I think that as a committee, I believe we can make a recommendation to accept the language, omitting those 3 words. Accepting the language that is indicating that sidewalks need to be free of obstruction and that sidewalks are for everybody. I would suggest that perhaps we change the word materials to property, which I think is a more accurate description of it. And I think then, aside from that, as a committee, perhaps we can at some point interface with the Committee on Homelessness. I was having a conversation with my son about this several weeks ago, and he said, why doesn't your committee meet with the folks in the homeless committee and try to produce some kind of document? And I thought that made sense. That's something that perhaps we could be thinking about in the future, so that we're addressing that issue. We're not sweeping under the carpet. We're saying this ordinance, it makes sense for the entire population, but there is this other issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Teresa.
I can be quick also, because I know time, but I something important that I haven't heard and I forgot to mention. I'm a case manager in Bangor. I've spent time on near CHCS and in that park right near there and near the homeless shelter and other areas. You know, handing out business cards and letting them know what my agency offers. And I'm doubtful, I have to say, that many of the complaints are not just because unfortunately it is an ugly sight to see that people sleep outside in the elements. I think a lot of the complaints, I would bet on it, that are simply because of that. We don't want to explain that to our children, and I understand that. As someone who's lived here for over 10 years, have 3 children that I've raised here, we absolutely love it downtown. And we've had to walk in those difficult places. We love the library, and how inclusive they are, honestly. And I have never had an issue with or have been fearful for my children. It's more of like hello and goodbye, and we respect you, we're humans, you're humans. But that's how I raise my children. I think that, and I understand it is separate, and we have a little, kind of a smaller task to work on than this is becoming. I recognize that. But I also think that I'm not seeing the issue with, you know, yeah, I remember when right near CHCS, right on the back end, it was kind of full of people and their belongings. A simple excuse me, how's your day? How are you doing? Do you know of these resources available? And they move right over. I haven't heard of any cases, and I'm sure we would have, because people do like to blast the negative of Bangor. I haven't heard of any situations where someone was like, no, you can't cross in your wheelchair. And quite honestly, I don't believe that even happens. So I do feel that we're accessible, but I think we're accessible to all, and we're not just focusing on the unhoused. I think we're just focusing on everybody. So that's all.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
Adam, did you have your hand raised?
No, I did not.
apologize.
No, you're good.
Oh.
So this is not to, I'm sorry, bring it back to, the language at hand is to, in subsection 257-4. It currently reads, license required to occupy right of way for construction purposes. The proposal is to just delete for construction purposes. Is that correct? Nothing in the body of the subsection would change.
There would.
Other than the addition of the enforcement.
The one sentence, yeah.
Right. So in thinking about this from an equity lens, if you delete that, it would then just say license required to occupy right of way. That implies that someone that can afford to get a license could then occupy the way. I'm gonna go back to what I was saying before and say, I just feel like it fits more appropriately under loitering, because then it applies to everyone, right? It's all, if you can afford to be here, you can be here, but if you can't, you can't. So just looking at it from that perspective, I can see why someone would read that and say, oh, well, if I can afford a $25 license, then I could do whatever I want in the sidewalk.
We also mean for renting our sidewalk.
Well, also, guys, I think that this, I think that to me, the issue at hand, right, is language specificity. Because we could 100% say, no one's gonna do that. But that's why that's why there's so many questions and so much feedback bubbling up, right? Like, we could say, like, they're not going to give you a fine, right? They're gonna use their humanity, but unless it's explicit, then there is this fear that it could be used to criminalize folks. And I think that is what we are here to do. It was punted to us. I wish I had a better word for punted. That's so like, thank you. It was referred to us because these are the questions, again, that the city council is hearing, and it's our job through an equity lens to look at this and say, this language isn't specific enough, or this language is specific enough and it ought not to pass, or this language is specific enough and we agree with it. Those are our choices here. And while we've all shared our feedback and we've had lots of rich discussion, and I'm grateful for that, at the end of the day, we have a choice of 3. And what we need to do now is either identify in that first choice of we would like to amend it with these specific language changes. We need to determine what those specific language choices are, or ought not to pass, or pass as is, but someone's going to have to make the motion for that, and that's gonna move us in the right direction. City Solicitor, did you have something you wanted to say before
I was just
Well,
going to address the issue of the license.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the section would also continue to be applicable for construction projects. Those are the people that be getting licenses.
But the way it would be written, it would imply anyone with a license, just looking at big picture.
Right, anyone in theory could go and try to get the license, but in reality, it's gonna be the construction projects that are going to get, you know, to block a sidewalk, to construct some building that's go, you know. on the side.
Chair, clarifying question for the city solicitor.
I'm so sorry, Andy, I have to have you come up if you're gonna talk.
License doesn't imply that you pay for a license fee. License is the right to use, and it's revocable in the law. Is that correct? Okay, yeah.
All right. I want to move us forward on this item. Is there anyone who feels strongly about making a motion in one direction or the other?
I agree. I think the language is clear, right? Like it is very clear what has been proposed. I would move that we accept the language, but encourage ought not to pass.
All right, I am going to need a little help with the language choices of making that motion, if that were the case. And again, forgive my ignorance, but would it be appropriate for, is this where, if there is anyone that would like to maybe instead offer suggestions to the language, to do that now before we make the motion? Or did you just make?
Were you listening to that, Dave?
Yes.
The question was the procedure, given that Pete has made a motion essentially to recommend that council not approve.
Right.
And now Katie's asking, when would be the appropriate time for an alternative discussion about suggested language to amend?
Like if there was an individual here who would like to say, you know, I think without specificity around what enforcement looks like, really identifying what the, you know, maybe removing the fine piece of it. Because that's the thing, like this doesn't, there's so many what ifs in here.
In the,
Right?
in the current ordinance, the first thing that it says is that, well, the fine provisions are something that is used as civil penalties in the event that somebody refuses to, you know, remove the materials. I heard a couple of things though. If there hasn't been a second on the motion yet, if you wanted to explore potential language to suggest for changes, I think you could do that. The other thing though, that a lot of times when we're talking about procedure, it's often suggested that a motion be made in the positive so that a no vote would in essence be that the proposed ordinance ought not to pass, and a yes vote would mean that would be yes, it ought to pass as is. Sometimes that's less confusing, and I'm not saying that's how you have to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
But then sometimes it gets confusing if the motion is made in the negative, you end up with double negatives and such. So that's just what I wanted to suggest. I think that there could be explored possibilities for alternative language. You can explore that now if you want, but if there's a second, then you have to discuss whether or not.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
But I have a question.
But before you, sorry, there was discussion on the table before it was seconded, so
Okay.
I wanted to give that opportunity. Thank you, sorry.
Well, I mean, before it was seconded, I wanted to just make another motion, but I don't know if I can do that, just to approve this amendment, but were still discussed in the first one, but I don't think that language is clear, the motion that Shane made, it wasn't really
Okay, well,
like,
but you don't have any other suggestions to
I was
be?
just gonna make my own motion, but
Okay.
since.
Okay, well, let's not,
Yeah.
let's open this up to any additional recommendations before we ought or ought not.
I'm a little confused.
So just
By
really
the-
quickly, I think I'm gonna, I actually get to do nothing, but.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I really appreciate.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was really helpful. I appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm confused by the motion.
All right, so the original motion made by Shane was that as it stands, they referred it to us, do you like it with having, where was this? Construction removed and, construction purposes, golly, sorry guys, hold on. Do you want it with, construction removed? And do you also want to include, the part about it being enforceable? I had a window up and now that window is gone.
I can tell you what that sentence says if you want.
Oh, you have it right here.
This is it right here.
That's it.
Okay.
So this is the license required to occupy right of way. Strike for construction purposes and then add the police department and the code enforcement division shall enforce this section. What Shane is saying that as is, our recommendation to council would be ought not to pass. Instead of us determining recommended solutions like city solicitor subcheck had in the additional in 2257-7, he said that we could also include, specificities about, what why this section doesn't apply to the temporary line formed on a sidewalk in order, and also what that enforcement looks like. And I do see value in specificity. Me too. Mark.
I have a question for you, Shane. What is the reason that you're saying it ought not to pass as a recommendation?
Many. I guess for clarity's sake, I would just say that it is not clear. The language is specific, but it is not clear as to the impact on people in the current moment. Because we don't know, right? Like if we say, yeah, go ahead and pass this, and then the police department begins removing everyone, we don't know what their option is, right? And I don't feel that that's, just looking at human rights, it just feels like we're adding another layer of you can't be there. If we say go ahead and pass it as is, we're just saying it's okay to tell people they can't be anywhere.
Yes, Suzette.
I think that, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we first have to have a motion if we're going to approve this or not approve, and then if we want to amend it, that would be the second step, right? We have to first of all say, do we approve this or the proposed, ordinance amendment?
Well, the motion's on the table. And unless Shane withdraws that motion, there can't be a second motion. It has to just be one motion at a time.
Yeah. Thank you.
And discussion of that motion. And then presumably a vote on the motion, unless it's withdrawn.
I'm not sure if the second's on the table yet.
The second,
If it hasn't been seconded, then it's.
Can I second?
yeah, anyone
I
can
thought that
second.
he did. Mark?
Okay, Mark makes a second. Okay, open for discussion on specifically the ought not to pass. I personally feel like I recognize that as it stands, there are too many variables that penalize individuals. I do think it's in our due diligence as a committee to offer recommendations, not just say no. That's why we have this space to be deep in this well, right? Where the council can't.
where we can really identify, we all, you know, if you agree that this should not pass, then what is it hinging on? And are there hinges that we can fix so that it's more, it addresses the sidewalk issues, but then it also keeps it, well, it addresses the accessibility, but it also doesn't penalize folks and doesn't just say it has to be yes or no. It can be specified. My God, my mouth is so dry. I like drank so much water, and specified is not a good word. Yes.
For me, I would have the recommendation of having language to include our storage, like our storage policy, at least have that in there.
I just feel like, yeah, I mean, I wish that we could propose another resolution, but I think that we could be here for days doing that. I think that there's a whole other issue that needs to be resolved first. Where do we put people? Do we just tell you to leave? I just think it's very complicated.
I agree. Shane.
Yeah, I just want to join with you and say the fact that council gave us one meeting to solve this problem, it seems like an impossible task, right? Because for us to do what we need to do well, we need more than 1 hour and a half long meeting.
Can we come back?
I don't know that the council gave any directive about one meeting.
But it will go at a second reading.
But I believe that the council would probably request that you have meetings more often than you regularly do. You know, so that it doesn't. I believe that's what council would intend.
I think that's a great idea.
The directive, is actually from Courtney's email. It says this item will need to return to council next month. So the committee should wish to make a recommendation. So should the committee wish to make a recommendation, it will need to be done at Tuesday's meeting.
I think, if I may, sorry, I think that's because, there's a sense of urgency, I think, behind this, and it has had first reading. But absolutely, I think that there is opportunity for this committee to set another meeting, for further discussion if that's what, the committee feels is in its best interest.
And that would be a special meeting specifically to address amendments to this ordinance if we felt the need?
Absolutely, you could do that, yes. Yep.
And if I might add, we could also, if folks on this committee need assistance in the interim with, for example, drafting or something, we could be a resource so that you're not coming sort of trying to pick things out of thin air and put them on paper, not being sure that it would work in the interim.
Thank you.
And if I may, there was a question about when it has to come back to the second reading. I think the city solicitor is better at answering that, but what I would say is that it was referred to this committee for a recommendation, and so I think that there's certainly some flexibility in terms of the timing, but because of the sense of urgency, I would expect that if we were to sit on it, for example, for too long, that the council may request that it come back for second reading, with or without a recommendation from the committee. So I would just, if you're looking to create that or set that second meeting, that we not wait until the end of next month to focus again on this topic.
When is the next council meeting?
The next council meeting is May 11th, I believe. Yep, so there is opportunity to meet between here and there.
So from a logistic standpoint, we would vote on the ought not to pass, and then could we vote like the?
Or you could withdraw the motion.
Right. I will withdraw my motion and make another motion that we meet again at some point in the next 2 weeks.
I withdraw my second.
Thank you.
Second is.
Second, the amended motion, which is that this committee meet before May 11th.
Yeah, and I think that we can certainly sit here and maybe schedule that while we're all here. Also, Catherine has her hand raised, just so you know.
To be able to identify if there are amendments, which.
So hard to chair, not just about what I think. Yeah, if there's opportunities to dive into this and get a little bit more at it, so that we all feel good about that recommendation, we can move forward. Katie.
Thank you for everybody. This was a great conversation. I do have one question for the pending meeting if we have one. Is there any way for the city manager or someone, I've been reading up on the ADA of sidewalks, and I think that that is an incredibly important part to this conversation and what Bangor already has in place for ADA for the sidewalks, because they actually have rules about, you know, extending the sidewalks, slope, things like that. So I would also want to see what type of infrastructure we already have for compliance. Because I think that's also important in this conversation too, because we all agree to safety for sidewalks and keeping that in mind.
Thank you.
I'm sure Betsy maybe could help us with that. I don't know if
I
she's
just,
still here, but
now I'm interrupting.
you're fine.
I just want to clarify. So are you looking for information about what the city does to comply with the ADA with respect to sidewalks?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And then if because there's some new laws that got updated a few years ago, so have those been implemented? Because if there's ways that we can make recommendations, maybe we can play off of that a little bit.
Suzette, in that language on sidewalks, does there have ADA compliance or any sort of mobility compliance outline?
It has,
Because I know when they did their full walkability survey a few years ago, that was.
And it'd
Thank
be
you very
helpful to
much.
read that too. Not like I'm trying to take over whoever does this for a job, but I just think we have to be educated too about this. You know, I take ADA very seriously, and you know, this is aligned with the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a new motion and a second. We will need a roll vote, the motion being to schedule a meeting before May 11th so that we might give a more thoughtful recommendation. I will call names for a roll vote. Katie.
I'll be there.
Yes. Adam. Suzette. Shane.
Yes.
Ray. Yes. Mark.
Yes.
Teresa.
Yes.
Katie, yes. All right. Unanimous passage. Thank you. With that said, let's identify a time for that. Are Tuesday evenings generally best for folks?
I know birds look for me for good, so.
Tuesday?
This upcoming Tuesday, the 5th, is my daughter's birthday, so I would prefer not to meet that day. But you all can meet without me, I don't have to be there.
She doesn't want to celebrate her birthday yet?
Probably not.
Like 5 or 4?
You know what, she'd have fun anywhere,
Yeah.
so.
Cinco de Mayo.
It is, yeah.
Some point in her life, she's gonna have very good.
Oh, yeah. I could do any other day that week, though. If there's a day that also works for everyone else.
I just can't do Wednesdays.
Okay.
Or earlier than 6, to be honest.
That's fine.
I think there's gonna be challenges next week with the counselor liaison having any capacity to participate because of budget meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not concerned just because, yeah, I like, not like I'm gonna, this is your recommendation, so you don't need me for the discussion.
In that case, I might recommend Thursday, May 7th, if possible. There's a budget workshop meeting that night in this room at 5:15, but if this committee started at 6, we would meet in the Paul Bunyan room just down the hall. Oh, sorry, the city council budget workshop.
With the school committee.
Oh, right, is that 7?
It's not
Or
on,
is it the Wednesday?
it's,
Did we move it? We've moved it so many times, my calendar might be wrong.
What night is school committee?
I think it's the 7th, I believe.
Yeah.
it's not on the calendar for either of those days, so that gives me pause.
What, on the public calendar, there's budget workshop on the 6th and the 7th.
Correct.
Quite confident.
Oh, are one of those the ones
Yes.
with the school?
Yeah, which is the 7th, because I think the school committee meeting is on the 6th, right? Okay, well, that won't work then.
Monday the 4th.
There are committee nights, or that's a committee night, so staff would be like very limited. I think we could probably, well, and personnel committee meets on Tuesday, so it's a very full schedule. Honestly, Friday is the only day if you're looking at an evening meeting.
What about Saturday?
Just go ahead and schedule it on the 5th, and I'll just write up my thoughts and send them in and put
Are
it in
you
your
out
capable hands.
All of Wednesday, or is there a later time on Wednesday that you could?
My girls are gymnastics. Why is Wednesday the best day that we could do it? We could do a makeup class. With the
Yeah.
kids.
Wednesday we could make work.
Oh, then yeah, let's do that. Yeah, absolutely.
What am I talking about?
Committee that you have school both the 6th and the 7th.
Wait, I don't think we do have it on the 6th because we have it tomorrow and we're every other.
Yeah, it's not on the calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 6th would be great then.
Wednesday, May 6th.
Yay.
Sure, that's okay for your.
Yeah, we could do a makeup. They've never missed. Or someone could take them. Their dad can take them. They have a dad. Yeah.
And 6.
Yes,
It's like the story of my life.
I know. Well, I forgot.
all right. Wednesday, May
Teresa.
6th at 6 p.m.
In this remark.
Paul Bunyan Room.
That's May 6th. Was it the 6th?
Yes.
Okay.
Wednesday, May 6th.
At
Yep,
6.
at 6, right.
Okay. 6 of 6.
Would it be possible, because I'm assuming you're gonna send a invite, a Google invite or whatever?
Yeah, sure.
Can you attach this document if you
Yes.
know where it lives, just so we can all
Yeah.
have access to it?
We'll also,
No, you're fine.
we'll also seek to compile the other information that we've heard, as well, and make sure you get that ahead of time.
Thank you. Yeah, Suzanne.
So a motion could be made to approve it as written as well at the next meeting.
Yeah. And that's what we'll do. We'll because we have those three options and we didn't really get to dig into the first and then not moving us to that.
So we could have I didn't wanna, sorry. So we can bring ideas like, sure, this can pass, but we should add this and say this. So we should think of those other, okay, cool.
Yeah, because I think that we had a lot of items that came up, for instance, what are the possessions, what, how can we clarify, the, if we need to readdress what the enforcement looks like, that kind of thing. Here, Suzette, thank you very much.
Are there any other people, parties that we should be sure are here at the meeting?
I love that question. I personally feel like this was a really lot of information receipt today, and it kind of prevented us from making a decision and actually referring the item to council. And I think I would hate for us to spend a whole other hour and a half discussing. I think that we had some really rich discussion that was so helpful, but we have to identify what, from an equity lens, we think is most valuable and move forward in that capacity.
So it sounds that would be public discussion or
Yes.
input, that's great. Will it still be broadcasted?
It would not be live, because the budget workshop would be live streamed, but it will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube after the fact. And a Zoom link for remote participation would also be available.
I don't want to still have access to Zoom on.
Yeah.
We're
still live.
saved on YouTube.
We're still live.
Okay.
Wow, we've not adjourned.
We've been live this whole,
No, it's okay. What is it?
we've been live
Oh,
this whole
yeah.
night.
May I make a recommendation, Counselor Beck, in the, there was the thought that you might miss tonight's meeting, and you wrote an email about the counselor liaison updates about what's happening, which is always so helpful. Instead of making time for that now, would it be appropriate for you to email? Is that okay for us to just be able to sort of understand what's happening at a council level?
You want me to hold you hostage and read my whole thing?
Look at everyone's like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. All right then.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, may I get a second? Roll vote, Ray? Yes. Okay, I guess we don't need a roll vote then.